Hello. This morning we're having a children's story for all the children that are present here. And we will have pictures up on the board. So it's from my first published children's book, which will be the basis for my reflection later, and it's called Liriel and the Dragon. Liriel lived in a land far away, and yet very near, where green hills roll to meet a dazzling blue sea. Liriel loved to wander along bush trails. We'll catch up. There she glimpsed lizards that scurried through the undergrowth and noticed birds that flitted through thin branches. One day, as Liriel walked along a bush track, the ground beneath her feet suddenly disappeared. She tumbled into a deep, dark hole. Down, down, further down, nearly to the bottom. Suddenly, a thin rope attached to her back mysteriously appeared and stopped her fall. She dangled in midair. As Liriel looked down, to her horror, flames erupted from the gaping jaws of a terrifying and very angry dragon. Liriel was terrified and hastily clambered back up the rope to safety. She didn't stop running until she reached home, breathless. This calamity began happening more times than Liriel liked. She would be walking along a path, and without warning, she would plummet almost into the snapping jaws of the fierce dragon. One day, Liriel was so tired she could not climb back out of the pit. What could she do now? No matter what she tried, she could not save herself. Liriel no longer cared if she was eaten by the deadly dragon. She waited. From the dark depths of the cavern, a gravelly voice demanded, "Why do you keep crashing through my ceiling? Why do you keep falling into my home?" "What do you mean?" Liriel wailed. She stared into the glaring eyes of the dragon. "I mind my own business, and suddenly the ground dissolves beneath me, and I fall into this dark place, and you try to eat me." The dragon looked flabbergasted. "Eat you? This is my home. My beautiful, quiet, dark sleeping place. I'm quite happy here until you drop in and scare me awake. What a nightmare. I thought you were trying to hurt me." "You're scared?" spluttered Liriel. She sensed the rope easing and her feet touching the floor of the cave. She approached the dragon sheepishly. The dragon no longer seemed so scary, but instead seemed very wise and a little lonely. Liriel decided to stay a while. She sat, and as they talked, she realised they felt the same way about a lot of things. They began laughing about how scared they had both been, and it felt good to Liriel. Sometimes Liriel visits the dragon, and they talk about many things. They no longer scare each other, and it is rare for Liriel to drop in unannounced. And the ground is firm beneath her feet.
A responsive reading from Psalm 40. I waited patiently for the Lord. God turned to me and heard my cry. God lifted me out of the desolate pit, out of the mud and mire. God set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. God put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in God. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, who does not look to the proud, to those who turn aside to false gods. Many, Lord my God, are the wonders you have done, the things you have planned for us. None can compare with you. Were I to speak and tell of your deeds, they would be too many to declare. For songs of praise from the psalmists.
We give you thanks.
Listen to the story of Jesus and his friends from the Gospel of Matthew 22 to 33. Immediately he made the disciples get into a boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking towards them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying,
It is a ghost!
And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said,
Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid.
Peter answered him,
Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water.
He said,
Come.
So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he noticed a strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out,
Lord, save me!
Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him,
You of little faith, why did you doubt?
When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying,
Truly you are the Son of God.
For the word that was in the beginning, the word that invites and inspires, the word embodied in us, we give thanks.
We give thanks.
Good morning. Accidentally, this reflection follows on from last week's focus on trauma. And I'm only here because Vladimir couldn't be here. So I welcome the opportunity to talk about the background of the story. Liriel and the Dragon is a simple children's book, but it's based on personal experience. I never thought I'd write a children's story, but 20 years ago I had an idea. I'm going to share some of the background and beneath the text, but I hope you have your own interpretations. I've loved hearing what other people have seen in the book that I didn't intend. I'm hoping the book will encourage intergenerational conversations so that older people can share with younger folk the difficult times in their lives, but more importantly, how they survived and what ropes of resilience they've woven or other people have woven for them. The idea for the book came 20 years ago when I was made redundant. It is said in business that a position is made redundant, but for those in that position, it definitely feels like you are personally being made redundant. It hurts a great deal, especially if you have poured your heart, your time, your energy, and even your soul into a position that is wiped out by a board meeting. When it happened to me, it felt like the ground dissolved beneath my feet, and I was no longer standing on firm ground. Who was I without this position? without this work, without a place in a structure, what on earth could I do now? Like Peter, we often feel like we are sinking in a sea of problems and difficulties. It's even more surprising when we sink because we thought our faith was strong enough. We had our eyes upon Jesus. We believed that we were following the right path. But then all the difficulties of life start to claw at us and squeeze us and make us wonder if we can survive. Like Peter, we begin to sink beneath the waves of worry, dislocation and fear. Like the psalmist in Psalm 40, we fall into a pit of despair. Wayne Muller, in his book Sabbath, describes the pit so evocatively. We are terrified of the painful grief that is hot to touch, sharp and piercing. When we stop, even for a moment, we can feel the burning, empty hole in our belly. Psalm 40 was a great help to me as it described the painful experience and eventual recovery. God lifted me out of the desolate pit, out of the mud and mire. God set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. Another thing that helped me in my years of distress, following the redundancy, was what I call spiritual imagination. I've attended several workshops of dialogue journaling run by Kate Scholl and found that I prayed in images. I'd never been taught to pray. In fact, when I was a young person, I thought I didn't pray properly. I did not know how to say "thee" and "just" an awful lot in a prayer. A friend of mine could do it very well, and I thought he was really a proper Christian. But then John Mallison helped me with conversational prayer, and then Kate doing the journaling. I realised that I pray in images. And so I had an image of me on the pinnacle of a very high mountain, and there was a gigantic dragon facing me, trying to devour me. And I was kung fu kicking it as much as I could. Then I realised I was fighting a lot of dragons of self-doubt, anger, fear, anxiety, and loss of faith. Gradually, the image morphed, and I realised the dragon could also be my power. If I faced the dragons of fear, I might find I was stronger than I thought I was. The story of Liriel and the dragon came to me as I moved from confronting and trying to fight the dragon to exploring what the symbolism meant. Part of my healing also came from becoming the Uniting Church chaplain at Western Sydney University. Parker Palmer wrote after he felt he had not fulfilled his vocation in a particular setting. As often happens on the spiritual journey, we have arrived at the heart of a paradox. Each time a door closes, the rest of the world opens up. All we need to do is stop pounding on the door that has just closed, turn around, which puts the door behind us, and welcome the largeness of life that now lies open to our souls. The door that closed kept us from entering a room, but what now lies before us is the rest of reality. He could write that, but you never say that to someone. You have to say it yourself. I was able to turn away from looking at the past, where the landscape was desolate and blackened and burned like a bushfire had been through it, and look towards a new future, where I saw a new landscape of lush green as I began ministry at Western Sydney University. There's an image in the book of Liriel dangling from a rope. The idea came from a blessing I use in the blessing basket at uni, and you'll find it at the back. I go around staff and students and I offer them the blessing Lucky Dip. You know the Conservatives, because they've told their CBM mates not to take it because they may not all be Christian blessings. Besides, it's a lucky dip. Whereas a lot of students like it because I say it's like Harry Potter's sorting hat, and the basket knows what you need. So as you leave, take a blessing if you like. It's also my business card, and it's amazing how often my name comes up first and not the blessing. But I got that blessing from reading Anne Lamott, who came to Christianity later in her life after a life of drugs, rock and roll, and a whole lot of other things. And she wrote, "Friends are what you cling on to when you're at the end of your tether and the rope's unravelling." For me, the image of a rope mysteriously appearing on Liriel's back is a sign that God saves us when we fall. Even though we feel we are lost and there is nothing we can do, a magic rope appears and stops our fall. The rope is a sign of faith, a sign of resilience, a sign of prayer, a sign of God's unceasing love and care. The threads in the rope of resilience might snap or wear thin. The faith that holds the rope together may be invisible, but it's always there. God doesn't abandon us, even though it feels like God has. Anne Lamott uses the imagery of a rope to represent a state of being overwhelmed or desperate or clinging to the last thread of hope. She uses this image in the context of prayer, suggesting that when we feel at the end of our rope, we can still reach out to something larger than ourselves for help. Lamott also uses the image to represent the support of others, like a church community, who help us hold on when we feel like we're losing our grip. Sarah, the illustrator, and by the way, this book has taken 20 years to get published, and my idea was that she would be able to put it on her CV. She's now much older with 2 children, but she's also a social worker. And she reminds people at our book launches that difficult journeys take time, and only when you are ready to face your dragons and when you know you have reached a reasonable and livable end, you know that time. The dragons might still be too fierce for you to meet them. It's okay to avoid difficult and scary places till you are ready to brave the new unknown. And now I'm going to ask you to do something scary. Jolien knows what's coming. I'm going to ask you to talk to the person next to you. Now, if you don't like doing that, you can do this activity in silence. So around you, there are ropes of coloured ribbon. And I'd like you to take one. It has to be in pairs, or you might be able to manage it in 3s. But I'm hoping you can talk about the threads of your life that have helped you survive. Who are the people? Who are the communities that have supported you? One of the important people in my life was my grandparents. George Gorton was a lay preacher for over 70 years. And when you visited Nana and Pop, every morning they read the Bible. You hoped you weren't there for Leviticus or Exodus or any of the begats, because they didn't miss a verse. They read everything. And for me, that was a sign of their strong faith. But Pop could also question or interrogate, as you say, the Bible. And so one day when I was about 19, he said, "In the beginning, God created the light." And a few verses later, God created the sun and the moon and the stars. How come? So I went away and researched, found out why, came back, and he said, God just did it. So he could question the Bible, and that questioning has been part of my faith. So as you talk, and I hope you all know how to braid, one over, one over, one over. So braid it as you're talking. If that's too difficult for you, then you don't have to braid. And if you don't want to talk, you can just sit and think about the people in your life who've been part of that rope of resilience that holds you firm, even when the ground is very weak underneath you. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then during the Taizé chant, we're going to bring them, if you want to, and put them on the table. Yes, some of the ropes do get knotted,